Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Stoltari, and I'm a genealogist and a passionate traveler. We are now exploring les filles à marier, the marriageable girls. Over the last year or so, I've been focusing on les filles du roi. Not finished that series, but I had to begin les filles à marier so we can keep up with these amazing women who were truly the founding mothers, and in some instances, the founding grandmothers of New France and indeed of North America. But before we begin, let me show you 3 ways you can help the channel grow. One of them keeps you in the know. It's subscribe, like this video, and notify. All of this helps me. And the next are ways to make that commitment a little bit bigger. Coffee, Etsy, and Patreon are all ways of supporting myself and the channel. So I thank you in advance, and I thank my Patreons and my supporters who have shown me their wonderful, wonderful dedication to the channel. So with that being said, let's get started, shall we? So Les Filles à Marier is a program that wasn't really a program. It was simply ladies individually, or a couple of them at a time, or 10 at a time. It wasn't a group like we saw we are seeing in Les Filles du Roi. Les Filles à Marier began in 1634 and ended in 1662. Just that, the individual women coming across, either sponsored by a church or a merchant or a family connection of some kind. These are women that came to New France without any kind of bonus, whereas les filles du roi were paid in essence. And had their passage paid and received things when they when they got here. Les filles à marier is similar to les filles du roi in that their intent was to get married and have children. That is what makes them a fille à marier. One of the excellent books, Peter J. Gagne's Les Filles à Marier, defines les filles à marier. There's a couple of definitions. You can't have a fille à marier that is related, that has parents here, for example. They have to be on their own. And so they are between the age of 12. That was actually the marriageable age at that time. I know that seems incredible to our modern ears, to about 40, 45, that sort of thing. And so there are criteria for that. And so these women truly were spectacular in taking that chance and coming to, in many cases, a wilderness, it was really, really the beginning of New France. 1634 marks the time when the France had retaken New France from England, who had it for a few years. They had captured it, and now they restarted, and now 1634 they began to really build. And let's have a look at one of the ladies that was part of that revolution. So her name was Jeanne Lemoyne. For those of you who have been following, on episode 10, we saw her sister, Anne, but Jeanne also came. So let's get to explore Jeanne and her choices. So Jeanne was the older sister of Anne. She was born in 1630 in Dieppe in Normandy, in the region of Normandy, part of the Saint-Jacques parish. Her parents were Pierre Lemoyne and Judith Duchesne. She was presumably baptized, dates back to the 12th century. And Dieppe, of course, is known for the famous World War II battle. You can see the famous shores of Dieppe there. But it was first noticed as a fishing village in 1030 AD. It became at one point the #1 port in the mid-century France. Another claim to fame was its revered school of cartography, which means map making. 2 graduates from that school left for the New World and established the very first French colony in the New World in 1564, which was Fort Caroline, which predates St. Augustine in Florida, if you can believe it. So that is the region of France that Jeanne would have come from. Let's have a look at her journey. After the death of their parents, Jeanne, her sister Anne, and their brother Jacques went to New France to join their older brother Charles, who was now the Sieur de Longueuil, very prominent man and major impact on New France. And so he was, waiting for them. So they were fortunate in that respect. They arrived in 1657, late in 1657, and each of them took a different path in terms of obviously getting married and where they settled and all of that. So let's have a look at Jeanne's choices. So Jeanne would select and was selected by Jacques Lebert de la Rose, and he was born in the commune of Pitre in the region of Normandy in the department of Eure. So they're both from the same region, which is very, very important in terms of connecting those dots. His parents' names were Robert Lebert and Colette Cavelier. He would have been born sometime in 1633. So he was a little bit younger than Jeanne. Pitre has a fascinating history, and then it once had a bridge to prevent the Vikings from sailing up the river to Paris. I'm thinking the TV show Vikings, I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. King Charles the Bald, that's how he's known in English, enacted the Edict of Pitre in 864 AD here. The church where Jacques would have been baptized is Notre Dame, which in some places of the church dates back to the 9th century. So suffice it to say, this place has been around for a long time. Very, very, very old and historic place. This is the marriage record of Jacques and Jeanne. They were married in Montreal on February 25th, 1658. And they, of course, would settle in Montreal. This wonderful city that would become Montreal started off as Ville-Marie by the founder Paul de Chaumedy, Sœur de Maisonneuve, and was essentially a missionary center founded in May of 1642. The colony would not thrive, and they were attacked by the Indians. It was just a very, very hostile kind of environment. And it was on the verge of extinction when Chaumedy decided to return to France to recruit 100 settlers in 1653, which would be known as Le Grand Recruit. From this small group would evolve the Notre Dame congregation from Sister Marguerite Bourgeois. And when Montreal was founded, there was no army, there was nothing to protect them. So by 1663, Chaumedy decided to create the Sainte-Famille militia to protect Ville-Marie and its inhabitants. It was made up of about 139 voluntary colonists, divided into 20 squads. And so this is something that Jacques would have been part of, aware of, and certainly it was very, very important to his future that Montreal be protected. Jacques and Jeanne would go on to have 5 children, a smaller amount than we're used to. Louis would marry Louise Françoise Grignon and have 3 children, and these were all in France. Jeanne would become a nun with the Congregation Notre-Dame de Montréal, and she achieved fame as one of the famous recluses of Notre Dame. Jacques would marry Marie-Anne Lacour and have 1 child. Later on, he would marry Marie-Louise Viret and have 4 children, 3 of whom made it to adulthood. Jean Vincent would be killed in a battle with the British in 1691, skirmish at La Prairie. Pierre would become a priest and work at the Hôpital Général. He was also a painter, and he painted Marguerite Bourgeois on her deathbed. What's interesting about this family is that they did not actually have any descendants in New France. But I chose to feature them only because of their impact and because of what Jacques did. And I also want to see, maybe there are people out there from France or with that connection that are descendants of this particular family from Jeanne. So I was fascinated. And let's get to know a little bit more about what they've been doing, what they did. You can imagine the research rabbit holes that I go into whenever I am exploring a new family. And when I found this was amazing. La maison de Jacques Lebert et Charles Lemoyne de Longueuil vers 1671. So the house of Jacques Lebert and Charles Lemoyne, around 1671. And today, in that, and I put the link to the this particular picture, so that you can have a look at it as well. And I don't know the date. I think it was in the 50s. The famille Will Green. Somebody actually owned it, and it was featured in a book of that time. So Jacques and his brother-in-law Charles both owned stores. They were merchants. Jacques also became involved in many business endeavors involving fishing and export and import with both France and the West Indies. He was also a powerful owner of land in and around Montreal. He was a partner in the acquisition of Ile Saint-Paul, today known as Ile des Arts, or Nuns Island. When I was growing up, it was called that. He was the owner of Saint-Pierre on Ile Percée, and he was also a co-partner in Senneville, again with his brother-in-law. He later bought out Charles's shares. He became an investor in the Compagnie du Nord, which was granted the right to trade with the Indians in the Ottawa Territory in 1682. In 1696, Jacques purchased what is called letters of nobility for about £6,000. This was a system in which if you were part of the third estate, which included the bourgeois and peasants, and wanted to be part of the second estate, which was part of the noble class, you could buy your way in. There was also other criteria. Later, this system was revoked, and people who had purchased their titles after 1689 were no longer noble. Jacques' descendants, and this is why I wanted to include them, so there are descendants, apparently contested this and were able to retain their titles. So please let me know if this is part of your ancestry. So Jeanne would die at approximately 52 years of age, fairly young for even that time. They would have been married but a short 24 years. Jacques would actually end up dying at the age of 73 in 1706. They would only have 20 descendants as of 1729, but I'm fascinated to know if any descendants from this couple are watching today. So let me know. As always, I love to share resources. The Quebec Genealogical Society, Genealogie Quebec. My newest one that I'm obsessed about is the French-Canadian genealogy. Genealogie de Québec, Nos Origines, it's called. And Maple Stars and Stripes, a podcast that I love. And then, of course, we've got some family societies, history societies that you need to be aware of and look up in case you are interested in joining. They have resources on there, and a lot of them, have kind of a focus on certain different areas, so you might want to consider that as well. But I've included all the links for you as well. So with that, we end the Lemoyne sisters. Obviously, Anne had far more descendants than Jeanne, but Jeanne and her husband had such an impact on Montreal. I couldn't not include them. And obviously, the descendants from Anne and Charles and Jacques even had some relatives as well. So it became a truly family affair, and I really wanted to feature this family and kind of get to know them. In a later series, I'm fully aware that I'm probably going to have to look at, doing Charles, even though it's not a fille mariée or not a fille du roi, and kind of look at those pioneers as well. So I got my work cut out. So, but we want to thank Jeanne because she was here for a fairly short amount of time. But she was lucky in that she was surrounded by her family. She had her brother, her sister, and her two brothers, actually. And she was truly able to have a life and participate in the true beginnings of Ville-Marie, or Montreal, and was obviously a good support for her husband. And so for that and her contribution and her sacrifice, we thank her, and we we pay homage to her memory, and we are grateful that she came to our shores. Thank you, Jeanne. And until I see you on episode, I guess it will be number 12, au revoir.